views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Straight ahead on this dish of perspectives, many are calling on the removal of President Donald Trump, this after the riot at the Capitol. Democrats are saying that he violated his oath of office as well as the United States Constitution. Coming up on today's show, we'll turn our focus on just exactly what the Constitution says. Constitutional law professor Gloria Browne-Marshall joins me next. This and a whole lot more straight ahead on Perspectives with Daren Jaime.
What's on your mind? Express what's on your mind. What's on your mind?
Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light. Cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference in someone's life. Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
What's your perspective? Let them know.
And hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Perspectives. I am Daren Jaime. And of course, we encourage you to join us here on Perspectives every week here on BronxNet's Channel 67. We also encourage you to stay connected to us here on the web at bronxnet.org. And yes, social media, that's still the game changer. You can visit us on our social media platforms, DC Jaime 23 on Instagram as well as Twitter. And then also my Facebook professional page is Daren C. Jaime. We talk about a lot of things, get some information as well as some inspiration. But coming up, we go front and center with all that took place on January 6, 2021. A day that will never be forgotten. A riot at the United States Capitol. And joining me to talk a little bit more about that riot and also the Constitution is constitutional law professor and the author of the United States Constitution in African-American context, as well as her new book, She Took Justice, the Black Woman, Law, and Power. We're pleased to be joined by Gloria Browne-Marshall, who joins us. And Gloria, good to have you back.
Nice being here. Thank you.
Well, I think last time we got together, we were talking on a little bit more pleasant note. But as we look at this show today, we have to focus on January 6th, 2021. Many Americans were saying, listen, I'm hoping to get out of 2020 with all that COVID had to offer, looking for new light in 2021. And less than a week in, a riot at the Capitol. I remember because I was literally about 20 to 25 minutes away from there. But give me your thoughts on what you saw and your reaction.
Well, I was actually on the air live on WBAI on my show, Law of the Land. And I was looking at the C-SPAN coverage and speaking on the air live on radio when I heard the scuffling. And I know what it sounds like when a fight breaks out and chairs start falling. And so I said, oh, my goodness, even though the cameras were turned onto the chamber proper, watching Nancy Pelosi and others count the votes, the electoral votes. And this was supposed to be the coverage of the Electoral College votes, the last part of a process we had discussed earlier. And then when I heard the ruckus and I thought, oh, my God, what is happening? Here's my concern. What I saw was a lynch mob. And our nation's history is filled with over 5,000 brutal murders by lynch mobs. We saw a lynch mob. They had actually erected a gallows. They had ties to hold hostages. They had weapons and lead pipes and tear gas. They were there to kill. And when they reached Nancy Pelosi's office, if she had been there, I think they would have killed her. And so I was shocked by what I saw, but I was also shocked by what I didn't see. I didn't see the full contingent of police they had for Black Lives Matter protesters that summer. I didn't see the arrests that should have been taking place, nor did I see them actually shooting these people, even though their guns were out to protect the chamber proper. These things were appalling, traumatizing for a constitutional law professor like myself and others who believe in the rule of law and the role of law. But it still remains to be seen what will ever be done to these people who were this brazen.
Yeah, I remember I was watching literally I saw the senators in the House, and they were leaving the chambers, and they were going to go into their 2-hour meeting, and the meeting had begun. And then I remember, I turned around, and next thing you know, after all the scuffling and the fighting, I see the same people walking in the same direction in the Capitol, the same way that they walked out, guarding the ballots, guarding what was. And I said, something is extremely wrong. I've been to Washington, D.C. before. And when I say before, I'm really speaking like, paraphrase. I've been to D.C. hundreds of times and literally covered that. And the first thing that comes to mind is, you feel like you're under Fort Knox on a normal day with all that Capitol Police there. But I saw none of it. And what really got me out of everything was the fact that there was no real enforcement. None. I didn't see anybody getting arrested. I didn't see anything happen. And it made me have to think for a minute about two different Americas.
Very, very much two different Americas. The Black and brown and immigrant America, where we are over policed and under prosecuted when it comes to harm against us by wayward prosecutors who have no problem deciding they're not going to press charges. If you think about, we just had that Kenosha shooting of Jacob in Kenosha, Wisconsin, in which he was shot in the back and paralyzed, shot 7 times, unarmed by a police officer. The prosecutor decided that same week, last week, not to bring charges against the police officers. And yet, at the same time, we have police officers in that lynch mob. We had probably lawyers, we had government employees of all kind in those lynch mobs that back in the day, and the sheriff was in the lynch mob during the time period of the early American lynches. And now we have, police officers, firefighters, EMS people, government employees using our tax money. We pay into a system we can't even rely on to protect us. They were all in that lynch mob.
It's amazing the amount of people that we actually now find out were there and continue to find out were there due to facial recognition and a whole lot of things as well. I want to talk very quickly about the Constitution. That's what we started talking about. And, we've heard that there's the possibility of the 25th Amendment and possible breach of Constitution. So walk us through, as a constitutional law expert, talk to us about the Constitution and where the president violated those articles.
Well, if you think about it, the Constitution says in the oath of office is the main responsibility, protecting the country by protecting the Constitution. The oath of office is a very simple one in Article 2 of the Constitution. The president swears to uphold and protect the Constitution of the United States. So inciting a riot in which hundreds of perhaps thousands of people are told to attack the Capitol goes against the constitutional principles that Donald Trump was supposed to uphold. And of course, he might have had different opinions about whether or not he won or lost the election. But what we saw was an incitement of a riot that led to murderous crowds that actually took a human life. And what we also had was a person who got into his car and went back to his bunker of the White House to party as he watched it on television, laughing and cheering, hoping that life would be taken as they chanted, "Hang Mike Pence, the Vice President of the United States." So yes, the 25th Amendment was meant not just for physical disability, but also mental disability. And there was a vote to request that Mike Pence actually enact the 25th Amendment and remove Donald Trump from office, begin the process of removal. But Mike Pence refuses to do that. And so therefore, a second impeachment is in the works.
Coming up after the break, we're going to continue our conversation talking about the Constitution. What exactly can happen from here? The Democrats are talking about introducing articles of impeachment. We know that that's already going forward right now. Let's talk about what this all means and what this actually represents. That coming up next here on Perspectives.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption
of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting from Bronxnet, this is Tran.
Back here on Perspectives, Daren Jaime here with you, and our guest, constitutional law professor Gloria Browne-Marshall. She is sharing with us as we talk about the events of January 6, 2021. A riot, yes, a riot ensued at the Capitol, the United States Capitol, the place, the seat of democracy. Who rioted on that particular day? Thugs, insurrectionists, people who wanted to commit sedition, people who were looking to do harm, bodily harm, physical harm, harm to the United States of America, harm to the democracy, harm to United States senators, harm to Congress people, and harm to the Capitol Police. In the end, the Capitol Police officer is dead. Many others are injured. In the end, one civilian, a Trumper, lost their life. In the end, well, one was shot to death, I should say. Others lost their lives. And many are still left to ask the question, why and when has this ever happened in American history? Gloria, I'll start with that again. When was the last time we saw anything like this in America?
Well, I'll tell you on a smaller scale is 1898. And what I'm really surprised is no one is really mentioning the coup that took place in Wilmington, North Carolina, in which duly elected Black politicians were attacked by a white mob, very similar to the white mob we saw on January 6th. They not only attacked those Black politicians who had been duly elected, but they lynched Black people, they burned Black businesses, they burned Black homes, they drove a great number of the population, the Black population of Wilmington, North Carolina, out of the city, and it was never the same again. It was a bustling place, just like Rosewood, Florida, and Tulsa, Oklahoma. These are bustling, booming places of a Black American prosperity and progress that are attacked by Black mobs. But this is the only known coup to take place in America, is the coup of white lynch murderers against Black duly elected politicians in 1898 in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Yeah. And when we look right now, we talk about the Democrats possibly impeaching the president again. This would be the second time if he is impeached. Give me the thought process behind this here. And with only a few days left in office, is this ceremonial or is this really factual?
It's both. It's necessary. There has to be some criminal consequence, and you cannot indict a sitting president. So as long as he is in office, he cannot be brought up on charges. He cannot be arrested. But once he becomes a private citizen, then he can be brought up on inciting a riot charges and all the other criminal consequences that come from that. He can be brought up on charges, perhaps from Cyrus Vance, the DA here in New York City, or Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York State, and across the other states where they might decide to bring charges, as in Portland, Oregon, for what he allowed to have happen there. The reason why it's necessary for the second impeachment is that if he is impeached and they do find him guilty this time, because the articles of impeachment are put forward by the House of Representatives, but the trial takes place in the Senate. And the Supreme Court Justice, the Chief Justice Roberts, sits as the judge at that trial. Donald Trump does not have to still be in office to have that impeachment take place. So this can take place after he leaves office. But it will also, if he's found guilty, prevent him from holding any higher office for the rest of his entire life.
And then we also understand, too, I saw something I have not got it confirmed, but he would also lose his Secret Service protection as well as a private citizen. And those consequences we already know that social media, Facebook, Twitter, have also said that he cannot do what he does. banning him permanently, something that I said should have happened a long time ago, but all of a sudden it takes a riot and it takes lost lives in order to do that. And I'm really stuck, and I have sometimes a loss for words at the double standard about how the Constitution is really utilized. We're talking about a Constitution, let's remember, that renders African Americans as 3/5 of a human being. With where we stand today, any possibility we can see? I know Bronx Council member Andy King has been trying to rally against the 3/5 law. Of course, he's got his own challenges, his own self, but talk to me a little bit about that. Is there any chance that that might even change?
Well, I mean, the language itself was repealed as far as its efficacy and its application in law. But sometimes it's good to have the words there to remind people of the American history and American Constitution. African Americans put the conscience in the Constitution. That's my phrase. We put the conscience in the Constitution. Prior to that, it was about big business. The Constitution was about how government interacted, from federal government, its interaction with the states and federalism. But we then used the 14th Amendment to actually challenge the way that this country was run, challenge equal protection as it was actually applied. So that conscience in the Constitution means we can see the 3/5 clause and how African Americans were seen under the Constitution to see where we are now and what's had to happen in order for us to have what is a semblance of equal protection, but we still know that it's not equal. We know that if those had been African Americans, people of color, immigrants protesting for their rights, they would have been slaughtered on the Mall of Washington, D.C. I've covered the U.S. Supreme Court as you've been in Congress and covered it. I know how difficult it is to get there. We know that there was duplicity among the Capitol Police. They're taking selfies with these ruffians, these mobsters and murderers, and they could not have found Nancy Pelosi's office. We know how circuitous those offices are, the whole building. Right. There's an underground railroad that takes us from one building to the next. How they could find their way around, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody's still hiding in the closet in there right now, who never left. I mean, that's how deep into the bowels of this Capitol Hill it is. And for them to find these offices, to do what they did, and then just casually leave, get on planes, trains, drive away, and think that nothing was going to happen. This is the failure of prosecutors across this country, the failure and ineptitude of prosecutors who know very well how to prosecute Black people, brown people, and immigrants, but all of a sudden lose heart when it comes to prosecuting white people for doing these types of hellacious acts, or police officers for participating in the murder of citizens. Over 1,000 people killed each year at the hands of police, and yet what few trials we have usually end with, now inept prosecutors unable to get a conviction when they can do so readily when it's a civilian who's the defendant. All of these things are taking place with this double standard, and our Constitution's being bantied around as people holding an American flag break it into the Capitol at the same time. This type of duplicity and insanity is what we've come to in the 21st century, because we've never addressed racial justice issues, and we've never had national criminal justice reform that also involved the prosecutor's office.
Well, my conversation has always been this. I find it hypocritical that now you're having law enforcement officials go back to somebody's home and have them arrested, when the truth of the matter is, if we're talking about African Americans and brown faces, they would have never made it home, because there would have been bodies at the Capitol. I do want to give a special shout out to now who's being hailed as a hero, Capitol Police Officer Eugene Goodman, who was pictured in many videos running up the steps of the Capitol, and it seemed as though he was running away from the mob, only to find out that he was actually distracting a mob away from a bunch of senators who were right there in plain sight and allowed it to be at the Senate chamber. And what he did was he led these people away in distraction while those senators were taken away safe, because if not, we could have seen the potential loss of life in major ways within both those Senate and House chambers. And I do agree. When you think about what goes on, we know the Hart building, we know the Dirksen building very well. We know the Underground Railroad. For them to be able to find their way right into Pelosi's office, for them to be able to find their way into certain congressional offices and Senate offices gave me the understanding and the feeling like these people already know like the lay of the land. So there's got to be more to it. And I know the investigations will continue into 2021, but it was appalling. It was shameful. And I hope that we get more answers and we're able to see more of literally the sheets being uncovered on some of these people.
Well, we have probably firefighters, MTA, New York City police officers, state troopers who were in that mob. And even though Mayor de Blasio claims that he is going to terminate these people, he's never had the political will to go against NYPD. Once they turned their back on him within his first months of office, he's been a coward when it comes to actually pushing back against police. So I think it's just unconscionable that people who are supposed to serve and protect us, who are taking our government money, paying their bills with our money, and we are afraid of our own police department, elevated to the standpoint of celebrity, who are accountable to no one except their union. This is the entire situation is one in which we have to live in fear of our life of our own police department. This is the type of militarization of the police that has now backfired on so many of us, liberal and conservative alike.
Let's take a quick break. We'll come back with more with Gloria Browne-Marshall. We'll return right here on Perspectives. Back with Gloria Browne-Marshall as we're continuing our conversation talking about the events of January 6, 2021. And I had a personal experience myself riding up 95 the day after we left, and we were on the highway coming back home, going back from the Baltimore, well, I should say the DC area, right around Baltimore, where we encountered a Jeep. And the back of the Jeep, all of it was writing on the Jeep. And what was written was the 10 million MAGA March, January 6th, 2021. That gives you a perspective of what people were actually thinking then. All right, Gloria, let's have a conversation, talk a little bit more, but I want to talk about you now. You got a lot of things happening in the fire. I know you shook your head on that one right there. They were actually calling it the 10 million MAGA March.
And, and what's so sad about it, when there was the Million Man March, when there was the Million Woman March, everything that we try to do as African Americans is seen in some bad light that is undermined. And yet they feel that under the Constitution and under any law, they can do what they want or act as lawlessly as they want to, with lawlessness, murder, in their hearts, weapons they're taking into places where they know those cities and municipalities do not allow them to carry in weapons. And the police give them a free ride nearly every time. And it's been these people who have murdered police officers. when there was a murder by Eric Frayne, who killed one state trooper and wounded another one, and was on a manhunt for him for 48 days, he was brought in alive. Time and time again, we have white people killed. In Las Vegas, a white couple killed police officers, and they had a shootout, and they were killed at the end after they took their own lives in murder-suicide. What really gets me is after slavery ended, it wasn't African Americans, it was white people who murdered African Americans as we went on about our lives. This idea that, policing that came from slave catchers, came from bounty hunters, and it's never been reformed. And so many of the projects I work on right now, one is to support national criminal justice reform that includes the prosecutor's office, because over 5,000 people lynched in this country. Where are the prosecutors? Right. Where were the prosecutors? We have witnesses, the same way you saw the faces of that lynch mob on January 6th. If you go to any of these photos of lynchings that took place in this country, you will see the people who participated in this lynch mob, their full faces the same exact way, under hanging bodies. So prosecutors knew who they were. The witnesses were there. They've always been able to believe that they could get away with murder with impunity. And so I wrote this play, Shot. And this is about a Black teenage boy who haunts the white police officer who took his life. Because there are so few consequences, criminal consequences to these officers, there are so few remedies that exist right now without this criminal justice reform and transformation of a prosecutor's office, that I felt it was only the death of this boy coming back to haunt the officer that I could use at this point. And even though I write books like She Took Justice that speak to these issues, I've written books before, and I write articles and other things. It was this theater that has been a part of my life from the very beginning that I had to use to actually bring to the forefront the anger and disappointment I have had with our criminal justice system and the failure to actually bring these officers to justice, because they must face criminal consequences. They must be prosecuted. And those who cannot prove they fear for their lives must go to prison. And so that's my play, Shot, Caught a Soul, that I think is worthy of people to watch.
Yeah. Before we go, real quick, they tell me I'm out of town, but let me ask you, where can they watch the film? How can they check that out?
It is going to be on YouTube. And what I think is a virtual stage reading, and you'll see it has higher production values than any virtual stage reading people are used to seeing. But I also think it's very important for them to follow me at brown-marshall.com, and they can see it on my website as well. Brown with an E -Marshall with 2 L's.com.
Gloria Browne-Marshall, we got to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us. Your voice very critical, especially at a time like this, giving us some perspective, literally and figuratively. Thanks for joining us here on Perspectives.
Thank you.
All righty, Gloria Browne-Marshall, our guest here on Perspectives. Listen, we are about out of time, but we are definitely not out of content. Stay connected to us. We'll be having more on the discussion of what took place January 6th, 2021. It was horrendous. It was horrific. And most of all, our thoughts, our prayers go out to those officers that actually were injured and those who lost their lives, as well as civilians and those who were deeply impacted by the events of January 6, 2021. Make no mistake about it, they were thugs. Make no mistake about it, insurrectionists. Make no mistake about it, sedition. And make no mistake about it, they all should be in jail. I'm Daren Jaime. That's Perspectives. Talk to you later.